travel is an integral part of fantasy role-playing, probably due to its deep roots in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I mean, The Lord of the Rings is basically one big journey, and if you watch the movies, you might come away from it thinking that you want this in your D&D game. But then you realize that it doesn't feel as great as it ought to. Maybe the travel feels disconnected from the overarching story, or more like a intermission than the next story beat. It might even confuse your players as they try to figure out what the significance of that wolfpack attack was. Or the travel can feel drawn out because the DM hasn't got a plan for what to do with the time spent traveling, and if the travel occurs late in the story, it can break the pace by slowing everything down. So how do we avoid all this and make sure that travel feels great? It starts with asking one important question. If you are about to include travel in your game, no matter how long or short the distance, you should always start by asking yourself, why do you include travel? You always have the option to not include travel and simply resolve it with a few seconds of montage, effectively letting the party fast travel to their destination. So travel is a choice, and you need to know why you're choosing it, because if you don't have an answer, maybe the best option is to simply skip it with a montage. Maybe you have an idea of the answer before you even ask the question, but it's still important to ask it anyway, since it might get your ideas going, and you might see opportunities that weren't obvious to begin with. In general, it's always healthy to question why stuff is in your story, so let's look at some of the possible answers that you might get. The first and probably the most common reason to include travel in your game is to make your world feel large and authentic. If you played games like Skyrim or watched the final seasons of Game of Thrones, you'll probably know that fast travel can make a world feel really small. This option is probably also the unconscious reason why most DMs include travel in their game. It just feels right. I mean, if you need to go to a place, obviously you should travel there, right? This is a perfect valid reason to have travel in your game, and I'll get into ways how to make it work later on. A second reason for travel is using it to foreshadow coming events in the story, or to reinforce the setting. An example of this could be that you let the players know that the kingdom is on the brink of revolution, and while they are traveling through towns and villages, they witness some of the injustices that is sparking this revolution, as well as disgruntled crowds gathering in village centers. The inns they stay in are buzzing with rumors of uprisings, and there are revolutionary leaders holding speeches and such. Or if the party is trying to deal with a curse affecting the entire realm, showing the curse in effect in several different towns and places reinforces the importance of dealing with it, since it's really not a local issue. It's across the realm. If your campaign is set in a war-ravaged country, traveling can show how the land changes. Where there were once lush fields of grain, now they're overgrown and abandoned. And where sheep grazed in neat pastures, the livestock now roam freely in empty villages. A third reason for travel is the opportunity to have events occur during the journey. Maybe you need the party to meet an ally, so you make sure that this happens on the road. Or story-relevant events could occur, like the party witnessing the return of a famous wizard that is appearing in the middle of a town square. Or they hear a royal proclamation that outlaws one of their close allies for obviously corrupt reasons. It could also be events relevant to the characters. If they, for example, did something to piss off a high-ranking person, their retribution catches up with them while they're traveling, or maybe the word of their deeds precedes them, and someone they encounter in their travels wants them to help with something similar, like save a temple or something like that. A fourth reason for travel is to expand your world building. It's a chance to show how local customs and cultures vary from place to place, and it might be a huge difference if the journey is by ship, like different islands being very different from one another. If you have let the players know that they are in the magical kingdom of Mysteria, you can show this by having them come across some Japanese-style village festival centered around illusions. If the party has a character capable of making illusions, they could participate in some kind of friendly competition. Or they could simply just enjoy the view. Or if they are in a place known for its martial traditions, why not have some other travelers challenge the party to some friendly duels on the road? It'll put action behind your world description. Finally, let's not forget that travel can be about the simple pleasures of seeing new things, tasting novel flavors and having experiences. Perhaps the party comes across a place of great natural beauty, giving them a reason to stop. And while they are stopped, maybe the quarreling characters have a chance to sort out their problem between themselves. Maybe a local guide offers to show them a sacred healing spring tucked away nearby, or a haunted wizard's tower, which might provide an interesting night. That could be this classic, if you survive one night in a creepy old house in the woods, you get some kind of reward, or something similar. As you can see, there are several good reasons to have travel in your game, so let's look at what to actually do with it. Knowing why you want to include travel in your game is a good start, but it's just the beginning. We now need to figure out what will actually take place during the travel segment. The first thing you need to keep in mind before you plan your encounters and other events is that everything needs to tie into the overarching story or the characters in some way. This ensures that the travel segment will feel like an integral part of the campaign and not just like filler. First, let's look at some examples of how to tie the story into the things that happens during the travels. If the party is supposed to meet someone in the next town that will help them with some story relevant quest, you can have this person meet them somewhere in their journey, maybe by picking them up on their ship from some small fishing village or meeting them at a specific roadside shrine. This gives the opportunity for complicating the journey if the person doesn't make it to the rendezvous. Maybe there are signs of a kidnapping or a person has left a cryptic note or something like that. Another story tie-in could be that a person informs the party that on their journey to Port Yansaro, they could detour to Smuggler's Cove to pick up additional information or help which might aid them at their destination. Or while flying through a desolate mountain region, the party learns of a secluded shrine where blessings relevant to their quest might be obtained in exchange for appropriate offerings. Or perhaps the whole travel segment can be turned into a chase, as the party learns that the fugitive is already only a few days travel ahead of them, fleeing across the desert. This wouldn't really change the travel that much, but it would imbue it with purpose and significance. Now let's look at examples of tying the player characters into the travel events. While traveling, the party hears about a renowned temple to one of the characters' deities, which is only a small detour off the road. Maybe they just go there to commune a bit with their goddess, maybe receive advice or instructions, or perhaps there's some kind of trouble at the temple that they can help with. Another example, the party comes across a traveling troupe of entertainers who invites the bard to join them in a performance. The bard then learns that there's an internal conflict in the troupe, and they have been dragged into this drama by one of the parties against the other, and they have to figure out how they want to solve this. Or the party passes through a town with a library of spell scrolls, which might entice the wizard. But access is not granted by simply asking. Maybe they need to help the owner with something or find another way in. Travel might be a good opportunity for the warlock's patron to ask for a small favor, like planting a seed of corruption in a nearby forest, or reclaiming an artifact from a local group of unworthy worshippers. A more broad event could be a local fair with different competitions, like log throwing for the barbarian, archery for the ranger, fencing for the fighter, and wrestling for the monk, and so on. Maybe the rogue notices signs in Thieves' Cant at the inn, which suggest that there's a nearby place to fence goods or buy cheap contraband, like potions or magical items. Or the sorcerer senses strange disturbances in their magic, which they might want to investigate, leading them to a wild magic rift, causing trouble for a nearby village. And the druid might sense an imbalance in nature and want to restore a polluted spring or brook, either by dealing with the source of the pollution or just restoring the place with their magic. You can, and you probably should, tie in character backstories as well, but without knowing the specific backstories, it's difficult to give examples of this. But still, if, for example, a character has history with a cult or some other organization, maybe they see signs of it during their travel. Or if a character is looking for a lost relative, maybe the road is a good place to drop a clue. As you can see, there are many ways to tie your story and characters into a travel segment. But what if you just want something simple, like a random encounter table? Well, let's look at that. The concept of a random encounter table for travel is widespread and is almost always included in official modules, so it's a perfectly reasonable thing to have in your campaign. However, you need to make sure that you actually create a random encounter table and not an irrelevant encounter table. The encounter you roll might be randomly selected, but it mustn't feel random to the players. In official modules, random encounter tables mostly include things that fit with the theme and setting of the adventure, which ensures that whatever you roll, it will always feel tied into the story in some way or other. Take, for example, the random wilderness encounter table from Tomb of Annihilation. One random encounter features roaming cannibals hunting and eating the many undead that stalk the jungle, which adds this creepy niche to the world building of this undead infested jungle. Another's dinosaurs, because it's a big thing about Jarl. There are dinosaurs, so encountering them will be equally delightful, and dangerous. I mean, no player's ever gonna complain about encountering dinosaurs, but here it just kinda makes more sense. Then there's a dragon, which the party might face later on in another part of the adventure, or a character which I will leave unspecified due to spoilers, but who could become a powerful ally of the party and even send them on a quest that is adjacent to the main objectives. Or there's just a simple swarm of insects encounter, which will really hammer home how humid and wild this creepy crawling place is. Basically, if you make a random encounter table for your travel segment, make sure that each entry has context. It doesn't even have to be super elaborate. Take a random bandit encounter. If the party has already been warned about a gang called the Red Claw, which is haunting the area, it won't feel random when they are attacked in the night by bandits with red paint on their fingers. Or if the table includes an encounter with an owlbear, just make sure that its presence is foreshadowed. Maybe the party sees some strange feathers on the road in the first day in the woods, and then they hear strange hooting sounds during the night. And on the second day of travel, they come across a merchant already desperately trying to fight off this beast. You could also tie encounters together to give them more meaning that they would have on their own. Like, if the party fights a pack of wolves, then maybe an angry druid will want to punch them further down the road, perhaps simply by humiliating them or setting their draft horses free, which would be very inconvenient if they are traveling by wagon. Now, the final suggestion I have for what to do with your travel is to turn it into a small story arc of its own. Here are some examples of this. Before leaving town, a merchant asks the party if they can travel together for protection, perhaps even offering payment for the hassle. But there's something strange in the merchant's cargo. Maybe the party chooses to investigate it, and maybe the cargo attracts attempted robberies, which the party will have to fend off. Then the party may force the merchant to come clean about the contraband they're carrying in their wagon, or maybe the merchant is revealed to be the daughter of a noble house trying to escape her family's expectations. There's something fishy about the merchant, and figuring out the secret becomes the little travel story. Another example, while traveling on a ship, some kind of drama stirs between members of the crew, drawing the characters into a conflict between the captain and her first mate, and then they have to choose between supporting or suppressing a mutiny. Or when the party wisely decides to arrange flying mounts to traverse a deadly and possibly haunted marshland, they discover too late that one of the griffins is sick, forcing them to land while they solve the problem. Then one of the other griffins gets sick from the miasma in the swamp, and the party needs to trust a creepy ferry owner to bring them to a person who might be able to heal their mounts. As you can tell, these stories don't need to tie into the overall campaign, but as long as they are their own proper little stories, players probably won't question their presence in the overall adventure. Of course, if you can find a way to tie them into the bigger story, it's only going to be a big plus. How do the characters travel? The vehicle of travel has a great impact on the journey and how it feels, so you should give it some thought, especially since the means of transport can adjust the length of the travel segment. Let's look at the different types of transport. First up, we have travel by foot. It is the slowest way to travel, perhaps except by slithering across the ground, I suppose. If you want to draw out a journey, this is a good choice of transport because it can make a small journey from one town to the next take days. Ideal if you want to do a little travel story or something similar. Next is travel by horse. It's much faster than by foot, so if you want to compress the travel time, giving the party access to mounts is a good way to do that. The extra speed also makes it easier to go off the road and explore without losing too much time. Travel by ship has a few perks. It allows the party to bring a lot of shit with them, and it's easier to have them visit a variety of places, since two islands are likely less similar than two neighboring villages. Also, the characters can engage in other activities during the travel than the actual travel itself. Traveling by air is fast and ideal for covering great distances, so the travel segment doesn't drag on too long. It also allows the party to traverse inhospitable lands, with the ever-present danger of actually having to land in those dangerous lands. It can be used to gently skip short travel distances if you feel focusing on travel would slow down the pace of the story, and it also allows for aerial combat, which is always a plus. Last up, there's travel by magic. If you don't want a travel segment, but the characters need to go somewhere, perhaps even somewhere distant, having a wizard teleport them is a good option. It also gives the opportunity for a mishap. For example, a redundant NPC gets lost in the teleportation, or a new player character is pulled along and appears with the party at the destination. Whatever you choose, it will make an impact on the travel, so give it a few thoughts when you prepare. Now, I've talked a lot about how to use the campaign story and the characters in making your travel segments interesting, but in this last section I want to look at things that you can do while traveling that has nothing to do with anything else but the traveling itself. Things that are intrinsic to travel and will make the players feel like they're on a journey, crossing the landscapes of your world. They can be divided into two groups: complications and navigation. Basically, they are the challenges facing a traveler that make up the most memorable parts of a journey. Let's start with looking at complications. These are obstructions that prevent a party from continuing their travel in a varying degree. You could think of them as minor puzzles that the party has to solve in order to get on with their journey. Here are some examples of some complications that you can plan to throw at your players during their travel. One kind of complication could target the road itself. A bridge that the party needs to cross has been damaged by recent floods, making the passage perilous. If they are on foot, they might need to do some dangerous climbing over the raging river, and if they have a wagon, they might need to construct some kind of temporary bridge or find another solution. Maybe they are chasing someone and they spot the target halfway across the bridge, so they need to take some risks in order to catch up with them. Another complication could target the party's rations. When they are making camp in a stinking marshland, one of the characters notices a strange sound during the night. It turns out to be rats that had gnawed on their rations with their frothy, diseased mouths, spoiling it all. And if they have a druid, they can easily solve this by conjuring good berries, and the druid will feel very significant from solving this problem. If they don't, maybe they need to go hunting or foraging, or decide to run the risk of eating the spoiled rations, which might complicate the journey even further by spreading disease. A third complication could target the party's means of transport. Maybe a wheel falls off the wagon when it's driving over a deep pothole, or a mount could get sick or injured in battle. A ship could spring a leak or lose a mast. Or perhaps the most common complication of a journey: weather. Heavy rain might make a mountain road slippery, a blizzard might obscure vision in a place where vision is quite important for not falling off cliffs. A ship could sail into a storm, and the party has to not only save themselves, but also try to save their ship, which might involve taking some risks doing so. Basically, a complication is something that the players have to deal with in some manner, and which is affecting their ability to progress with the journey. Now let's look at navigation. This is something absolutely essential to travel, since you'll never get to your destination if you don't try to find out where it is. But, important as it is, how do we make it a fun activity in a tabletop RPG? Often, navigation is handled by simply making survival checks. Even in Tomb of Annihilation, this is suggested as the baseline for navigating the jungles of Chult, but that isn't really engaging. If we want the players to feel like they are actually navigating your world, we need to give them some opportunities to make decisions about their direction. The first part is giving the players information. Say the party is going to another town, and they are told that they need to pass through a village called Littleton on the road. When they get to a fork in the road, they can see that one of the signs says Littleton, and they decide to go in that direction. This is of course a very simple example, so let's make it a bit more difficult. Same scenario, but the party has been told that they need to pass through a village on the way. Then they come to the fork in the road, and they'll see two signs, one pointing to Littleton and the other pointing to Bigton. They don't know the name of the village they need to pass through, so they'll have to make a guess based on the names on the signs. They might choose Littleton because it sounds more like a village than Bigton, but they're not sure, and that's the key. Basically, you want to give the players enough information to make them guess about the direction they need to take, but not so much that there's no doubt where they need to go. Otherwise, there might as well not be a fork in the road. Ideally, you want the party to discuss their choice of direction before they make their guess. Another way to do this is by giving the party a map. On the map, they can see that they need to turn right when they get to a fork in the road. The problem is, on the map, this fork is inside a forest, and when they come to a fork in the road, they are out in the open. Is this branch too small to be on the map, or is the map wrong? The party might look out for landmarks to help them determine where on the map they are. Maybe they can see a lake from where they're standing, which is on the map before the forest, so they decide to continue in that direction that seems most likely to take to the forest. In short, when you bring up navigation in a journey, you want the players to make a guess about the way they need to go. It doesn't have to be something recurring, just a single instance of doubt about the heading during one travel segment is fine. To conclude all of it, when you prepare your travel segments, remember the following. Keep in mind that the greatest pitfall with travel in tabletop RPGs is forgetting to make it relevant to the overall story. Make sure that you prepare something for the journey, just as you would prepare content for any other part of the game. And if it's a random encounter table, make sure that it has context so it doesn't actually feel random when the party runs into the encounter. If it's possible, try to use travel to expand your world building, set up future plot points, and give the players something specific to their characters so they feel rewarded for that backstory and character details that they wrote. Or simply tell a short, compelling story while on the road. Consider what you want from the travel segment and then provide the characters with the vehicle that complements this. Throw in some complications and the need to navigate as well, so that the travel sessions feel distinct from the more stationary sessions. In short, as long as you have a plan for the travel segment, your players will likely enjoy it as much as the rest of the game. And that is it for today. Thank you if you watched this far, and you can help me grow my channel by throwing down a comment in the box below. Tell me about some of your travel experiences in D&D, or maybe just say hi. Like the video, subscribe if you want to see more of this, and I'll see you in the next one. So take care of yourself, and bye, and happy Pride!